Welcome back. So this week I'm talking about radiators, aircon, condensers, the mounting, a little bit about polishing stainless. So I'll show you how to sand those down. So these were polished, but we're going to make them look a whole lot nicer. Interesting bits and pieces, more to learn. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget, click on the links, subscribe, like, and any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those and get back to you. Thanks for joining. I decided we better clean up the bolts and all that hold the locks together. So fortunately we've got a couple of sets here. So I made a decision that this is the bolt that holds the door lock into the door itself. So it's just fitted up on a bolt there so we can put it on the linisher. So they're going to be zinc plated, silver zinc. But before I send them off to zinc, we normally give them a clean up. So we'll just show you how that's done on the wheel. So being zinc, the higher shine you put on it, that's what you're going to get when you do the zinc. So it's similar to the chrome process. So if you send it away like it is and they dip it, it'll come back looking a bit matte looking. And the more you polish it up, the more it's going to shine in the zinc. So we'll just show you that process. So just using a Scotch-Brite. The idea here is not to take too much metal off, we're just trying to give it a nice matte finish and make sure there's no scratches or marks from screwdrivers and things over the years. And then on the coarse polishing wheel, we're not looking to over polish this, we're more looking for it to have a matte, I wouldn't call it a matte, probably a semi-gloss. So when it comes back from zinc, it should be just a nice clean finish. So that's been used on what they call a rope mop. So it's quite coarse and it's really designed to take a bit of metal off or do that first coat. So we think that'll work really good for what we want to do. And you might have seen this bit of cardboard flapping around here. That just stops all the rubbish coming up and smacking you in the face. So with the door strikers, I decided in the end to buy some polished stainless ones. So, eBay's my friend, so that's where they come from. And, they're out of the US, but there's an Australian company selling them. But they came with the bolt, with an Allen key in stainless. And I really don't like that look. So I've decided to get some originals. And then we've done the same process on those as the other little screws. And they're, I think, a nicer look. And we'll get those chrome plated so they match the polished stainless because the zinc just won't be shiny enough against that stainless. So that'll fix that problem. So clean them up, get them away, A-class metal finishes and get them chromed up and that'll be another job out of the way. So with all the parts that we've been pulling off the car to get towards finishing the bodywork off, try not to just put them back in the container and then pull them out later and find they need work on them. So these are the front wishbones and they're made out of stainless. So that's a Rodtech front end. And these have been with the car, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, maybe longer, well before we had the car. And so they've been in a couple of workshops, so they've got a few marks and things in them. So what I've been doing here is just giving them a quick buzz with some 320 on the machine. And it's an orbital. And that really just gives me a first cut to see what I've got, any majors, and it takes out all the small stuff. So I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but basically got just little tiny scratches and pits and things just from, wear and tear in the workshop. So it's really just a case of giving it a go and trying not to stay in any one spot too long because it will create a little square edge. And then once I've run that over, I'm not sure what grade the stainless would be, but it seems quite easy to sand, like as if it's quite soft, but being a front end component, I'd imagine it's not that soft. So that one's pretty good. There's not really any majors. Oh, there's a couple of little shiny spots here still. So I'd go from so what am I on? I'm on the 320, so I'm just going to persevere with that. And and then get those out. I mean, if there was no marks really visible, I probably wouldn't do the whole thing in 320. I'd maybe just start straight at the 1200. But this is something I've only been doing in the last few years. I used to always sort of hand rub it, you know, worrying about the finish. But the orbital scratches seem to come out really good. So I've got some 800 there that I've trimmed out of a 6-inch sheet. And like all polishing, it's a process of reducing the size of the scratches. So you go from your 320, then 800, and then 1200, and then we'll stick it on the wheel and use that rope wheel again with some grease, and then a finer polish after that. So at the moment I'm really just making sure that the whole thing's ready to be used or put straight on without having to have to be pulled out at assembly time, and then all of a sudden there's this massive job to be done. So this one's a 1200. And your 1200's almost starting the polishing process. I mean, you can see the black coming off there now. So obviously you've got to do the whole thing properly, but you can see now that's starting to come up. So I'll take it out and throw it on the wheel and have a look and see how that goes. So when it comes to polishing on the wheel, you've got normally, there's a whole lot of ranges of different product you can use on the wheel, but the ones we use here is, we've got a coarse, and then a medium and a fine. And it obviously depends on how hard the metal is you're working on. So with stainless it's quite hard, but as I said, when I was sanding it felt quite soft, so you just got to be careful. So I'm going to go with the medium, which is the brown. This one we call the black, it's dark grey, and then the white. And this is like good for finishing on the calico with aluminium. So it depends on how you polish and your style, but you need to just look at, there are different ones, it's just not all the same one. And I've had a green in the past that's got like an abrasive in it as well, which I think probably sits in front of that again. So you need to experiment a little bit, but try the different ones, see what works for you. So when you go to do the wheel, so this is a rope wheel. So earlier when we were doing the nuts and bolts, we had the little one on. So the bigger you can go with, depends how much room you got and how big, how much torque your machine's got. I find the bigger the wheel, the less chance you've got of throwing the part on the floor when it grabs hold. So I'm not going to go into how to polish it today with this one, but I'm just going to show you how this comes up that we've been sanding, just to give you an idea of that whole process. So I'm going to go with the medium polish. So that's looking pretty good, but I can see the lines in it from that hard rope wheel. So I'm just going to try and work it up a little bit and then go to a softer wheel. So by using a little bit less pressure, it lets the polish do the work rather than the rope wheel do the work. It's a bit like polishing your paint. You know, the coarser the rag, the more it's going to scratch, which effectively is, the scratching is the polishing process. So I'll change that wheel now, because that sort of looks like almost a satin, shiny satin. So here's another little useless tip for you. If you're crammed for room and you're doing a bit of grinding, don't forget that these are flammable and they burn. So it's looking a bit worse for wear. I might have to think about finding some more. Okay. So we're on the white now, on the softer wheel. Patience is a good thing when you're polishing, because you need to take your time and not overdo it. So I've been out digging through the container looking for parts. I need 2 good door locks, a left and a right obviously, and also a good boot lock. So I've got a couple of boot locks. This one here I think we might have polished up for this car previously, so it's looks in pretty good nick, and I'll just need to get the key match for that because I don't have a key for it. That particular key should be a round key actually rather than a square, and because the ignition's normally square and the boot's normally round. So I've got two boots to pick from, and they've just got that spring on the back where the door ones have got the lever, and then I've got 5 door ones there that I'm going to go through and pick the best of those and then polish those up. And what I'm looking for, you can see just on the bottom edge of that maybe, there's a mark in the stainless that probably won't come out. And then quite often you can see in the jaw of that one where someone's jammed something in there and bent it up. So that's, you know, it may be repairable, but not worth the effort at the moment, because I should have at least 2 that I can put on the machine and polish up, and then I'll get them off the locksmith and get some keys cut. And I had these kicking around as well, so they're quite nice. They've got the Ford logo, a couple of blanks. So I'll get them cut, and then the car will have 3 keys, one for the FG ignition, and then one for the boot, one for the doors. Righto, so I've got that pretty right now. Happy with the look of that. So them brackets are all going to end up black, but at this stage the plan is to have this one loose, and it'll probably end up black cat or something as well. Thought about doing it in polished stainless, but I think it'll be a bit bright. So we'll get all that stuff welded together. And then, so I'll get that primed and then weld them on. And then the last thing to do really, this grille's been repaired before, but I think we'll fill this one up now. There's no need for that. Even with the factory catch, you can still get your hand in there, so we'll get rid of that as well. Can't believe the difference that makes. So that little square's out of all of the grills, and we've checked before. I can't see why they had to have that, but I guess it was someone thought they needed it in relation to the safety catch. So we've just used the hot stapler that we've been using on the plastics, and some of the other repairs we'd done previously, especially in the high sort of pressure areas where the bolts and that go, we decided we'd put some staples in there just to make sure it doesn't crack. So I thought I'd just come out here and do a quick video on the van to show you what that standard stuff looks like. So the lock plate there, and then these brackets. So the new ones we've made, the same width, same style, but we've taken these sides off and we'll direct weld them on, and then we've just changed the angle enough so that we can not hang down past the edge here. And then this front section we've extended out and moved the nut further out because we've welded the grill up and they tend to want to crack out the back of the grill all the time, so that'll let us move that bolt further forward. And then all these other holes have all been, the ones we don't need have all been welded up, cleaned up, and our condenser for the aircon will be similar size to that, so I've just got to work out the mounting for that now. So the next thing in line as we work forward, so you know we're working on these types of things. The aircon condenser, so when you buy these, this is a universal unit from J Air, and when they come they have something like that on the end of it which you'd recognise. So what we've done is taken that off and then reproduced something ourselves which is still fairly basic but is going to give us that look that I'm after, that sort of factory feel. But that'll enable us to actually put 3 screws in that, and we'll put some nut certs, and that'll go down in here and mount onto the radiator support panel. So nice and clean, looks good, not overly complicated, and it'll just match the style that we're working for with this car. So this will fit in, so the back will stay like that because the radiator fits behind, and I'm looking for the airflow maximum width. So our radiator will come out to here, and then we'll put a big single spout fan on there. So I spoke before about radiators and what we're going to do. So this is the radiator I've had done for my panel van. So it's an XC V8 as well, and this is the big aircon radiator. So I'll be getting one made the same as this with the factory tanks on it. And I looked at whether I'd do some sort of fancy brackets and how we'd go about mounting it, and spoke to the radiator guy about that. And this morning I've just decided these are the brackets out of the panel van. So, you know, I have one either side obviously that fits up under the tank mounts here. And I've decided to go that style, but to get everything centered properly and looking how I'd like it for this level of car, we're actually making our own. So these are just out of a bit of flat plate bent up on the bench with a bit of heat. And then we'll now mount that little bracket on there that will actually give us the standard rubber, and that'll then fit, that's the wide one, so that'll fit on that side. So it becomes rubber mounted on the bottom, and then we'll just design a pin set up to go on the top so it looks nice and clean. So that'll be pretty much standard style, but a little bit cleaner and a bit more Astill involved in the process. And we'll have one of those each side with the two different sizes, and I've pinched those out of a couple we had here, and that'll just give us a nice finish, and radiator will work good, pretty much the same way as the factory designed. So just following on from the brackets for the radiator, and I talked earlier about the ones for the Grille, just to give you an idea that, and I keep talking about this all the time, and I'm mainly telling you about these things because everything that I normally do is I try and do it cost effectively and utilising what limited tools I have. And those brackets, you know, look like there's something folded up in a big bender. Well, it's actually a bit of tubing the right width that just happened to be laying around. It's probably been around the workshop for a while. We've cut it out of there, bent it up, welded through the joins and welded a nut in, and you end up with a nice looking bracket that's just come out of a bit of RHS that's probably laying under your bench. Okay, so today I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about my style and my design and, you know, what's gone on in the past. Last week I showed you some door trim stuff. So this week we're working on the front of the car. So just to give you an idea where my head's at and how I come up with the ideas that I do and why I come up with the things that I do, it's really about my style is to try and create a car that I think could have potentially been in the design studio at Ford when they were trying to do the XC. So I don't like paneling stuff off. If I've got a problem with my headlight adjustment, I want to be able to put my hand in there and adjust it. Or if I want to change a globe, I want to be able to do that without having to have to remove panels or dig around and try and get in there like you do on a show car. So I'm trying to build a car that has a really nice clean feel, a bit like as if it was in clay before the manufacturers got involved and had to change it so that they could press the panel or make the grille and make it cost effectively done and then fitted to the car in 10 seconds on the production line. So where we can tidy up some of those areas, make a new bracket, weld up holes in the grille, whatever it is that gives it that nice clean look. But when you're looking at the car, if it's on display somewhere at a coffee, morning coffee or something, then you can look in and see what's done behind the scenes and not just cover it up with a cover. And then going on from there, I've talked about bolts before on some of the earlier shows. I'm back to that again now. So we're at the front of the car. So these bolts are very prominent. And for those that know their Fords, this one here is a chrome version, probably come back from my old XA days. It's been laying around the workshop, where that one's XA with the spring on it, then XB with the flat washer and a flat top, and then XC had the indent in it, and that's obviously left over from a Cobra. So I'm probably going to pick one of those or something similar to that has that feel. I've looked at, whether you do an Allen key with a special washer that you can buy, gives it that sort of billet feel. And I've just decided I don't want to go that way, and it's just not how I like to build cars. But it's in saying that, I've got these little fellas that we're going to use here because the originals are a bit bulky and I think this will look fine. It may end up being that I actually powder coat or coat over the billet. It just depends on where I draw that line, because I normally pick a point and say, okay, there's the big shiny engine and the billet hinge, but from here up it's going to be body colour. Or if the engine bay is a different colour, we stay with that colour. Outside of that, we don't have the chrome or the stainless or the billet. So it's about having the right things in the right places and then looking at it so it's nice and clean, but still potentially could look like maybe a hand-built production car. Interesting to look at that to see how that compares to what we're doing now with the old Boss XC. So this is all pretty stock standing looking setup. Patiently waiting.